Really appreciate it. It's really an honor for me to be here because one of the proudest periods of my life was when I was national director for DSA back, I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s, after Mike Harrington had passed away. And so it is really a great moment to see the organization still alive, with young people still here, still growing. And I think you're going to hear from Tom Hayden tomorrow night, right? And he was at an event in Southern California. He said, hey, most organizations last 7 or 8 years. And it's very rare to have the longevity. And then to have an organization like DSA with the history going back literally decades in this country in the fight for economic justice is extraordinary, and we should be very proud of that. But we face real challenges, and as Gus said, and I think what's great about being in DSA is that those challenges aren't necessarily a surprise to us. And that's what I really like about this moment, because as democratic socialists, when someone says, oh yes, if the finance sector is going to dominate the economy, inequality is going to increase. Who knew? Well, we did, right? Oh, you're going to attack unions, and so workers will no longer be able to earn a middle-class living. Who knew? Well, we did. If you destroy and undermine government programs for decades and reduce taxes on the wealthy, poverty is going to increase. Who knew? And of course we did. And that is the political moment we find ourselves in, is really after a decade of, everything we know we learned in the 70s, when deregulation started, when the attack on unions started in the late 70s, culminating in Reagan's election and the union busting of the air traffic controllers in 1980. With the deindustrialization of this country, really started even in the mid-60s, into the 70s, right? And Oakland is a great example of that. All those trends that have literally been, as Professor Berkeley and Yale, Paul Pearson here and Jacob Hacker in Yale said, it's literally a 30 years war on working people in this country, which has culminated in an extraordinary moment of gross inequality and challenge. I think we confront 3 questions for us in this time. Are we going to have austerity or humanity? Are we going to have a sustainable way of life, or literally see the expiration of the earth? I don't think that's an exaggeration. Are we going to live on our own as individuals, or do we still have common dreams as a society? And those 3 questions raise, I think, profound challenges for us, but the answer to each is contained in strands of a popular movements fighting back on each of those questions, to say that we will have humanity, that we can have a sustainable way of life, and that we still share common dreams. And the beauty of our movement as socialists is that we're both a part of those movements, and we have insights that will help those movements grow. In many respects, inequality is the issue of our time, and that is not simply inequality based upon class, but also on race and gender. Most prominently, poverty, of course. Our honorary chair, Cornel West, has done some extraordinary work. We were at a conference with him in Washington, D.C., that he and Tavis Smiley put together, addressing poverty. And, Cornel has taken a lot of grief, as we know, for his principled position, saying that the election of the first African-American president is an extraordinary event, but it is not the answer. It is not the solution. And in fact, having a principled position on the limitations of a single leader, and calling attention to poverty. And poverty in California, if you look at cost of living in California, the poverty rate could be as high as 24%, based upon actual cost of living. 22% of kids live in poverty. Now, think of that. Next time someone says, we are the greatest country in the world. Yes, 22% of kids live in poverty. That as socialists, we never forget that the unemployment rate serves the interest of capital. It keeps wages down. It moves profits to capital. And it continues to divide workers along, particularly race, but on other dynamics as well. So unemployment serves capital. We don't forget that. If the unemployment rate is 7.3%, that's of course an underestimation. Could be as much as double that. 148,000 jobs created, I think it was in September, and we need about double that just to sustain population growth. Obviously more to bring it down. Median family income has not changed since 1989, essentially, about 51,000 a year. The average annual hourly, that is the average hourly wage, is about 89 cents higher than it was in 1979. 90% of the income growth that has happened since the recession ended has gone to the top 10%. Corporations are sitting on about $1 trillion in cash. Most profitable period for banks ever in their history, 2010. So we got a problem, folks. We got a big problem, and the problem ultimately derives from a lack of working class power. Because that is, and the only institution that has historically challenged that level of inequality has been unions. And yet unions are vilified. As we all know, it was teachers and firefighters and nurses that are the problem and caused the Great Recession. Isn't that right? Yeah. Right? Because obviously the solution to our problem is to take away pensions from public workers. Now, Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone pointed out that the amount of corporate welfare that the states have given collectively is greater than the pension liability that the states face. Just another little factoid that we have a Democratic mayor of San Jose who's going to make it his cause to reduce public sector worker pensions. That's Chuck Reed, San Jose. That's his claim to fame. The political advisor of Governor Jerry Brown has declared unions and labor the biggest special interest in California. And that's his ticket to the assembly. I guess, hey, Wells Fargo, they only made about $5 billion last quarter. They can't be the problem. Chevron, nah. They're not a special interest. We have one of the most outrageous things. You all followed the debate over food stamps. Right? So our problem in this country is not that 50 million Americans lack a consistent access to food. It's that we're spending too much on food stamps. Because, of course, we have no money. We have no money except for the $26 trillion that the Federal Reserve guaranteed to the finance sector during the financial collapse. So the next time you say there isn't any money, they say there isn't any money, say, what the hell are you talking about? So on the economic side, the inequality is profound, but we have to acknowledge that white supremacy is on the rise. There's no way to sugarcoat that, actually. Because the efforts of voter suppression, the attack and destruction of affirmative action, the concentration of poverty and inequality in African American communities, the denial of rights to immigrant workers, all of those aspects are, and ultimately, I mean, we have a lot of different theories about the Tea Party, but essentially the Tea Party, in my view, is a racist movement, and you can only understand the Tea Party in the history of the backlash against the civil rights movement in particular. That's the only way to. When they say take our country back, I was in this airport hangar down in San Diego when we were fighting May Quitman. She was another billionaire running for public office here in California. I was in not an airplane hangar. It was actually the warehouse of Darrell Issa. Remember Darrell Issa, conservative congressman from California, head of the Government Reform Committee, Congress. And it was, I think, possibly the whitest event I'd ever been in. And they are silly on their risers, screaming, "Take our country back." I wonder what they meant. the stop and frisk in New York, we had a rally on September 17th in New York. Our slogan was "Stop and Frisk Wall Street." That was what we thought we had. That's what we had. A la Steve Colbert. But the point is, and I've already gone on too far, here we confront the politics of resentment. And how do we turn that around? We've, in our union, and I have the privilege of working for the National Nurses United, which there's no other way to sugarcoat it. It's a very progressive union. And we developed a Main Street contract for the American people based on FDR's Economic Bill of Rights. Because unless unions work with others to raise the standard of living for everybody, what unions have achieved will be wiped out. And that's great what the AFL-CIO is doing in terms of reaching out to community organizations. But fundamentally, unions also have to organize and bargain effectively. It is still the only institution in this country that takes on corporate capital in the workplace. And that cannot be forgotten. That is an essential component of our fight back. We confront the sustainable living or exploration of the earth question. And that's climate change. And one of the most disastrous aspects of the right wing is the notion that there is not a scientific consensus on climate change. We are at a tipping point. There is no question about it. We had nurses across that beautiful bridge, the first beautiful bridge on the bay, now we have a new one, fighting the Keystone Pipeline. And we were told, hey, if you don't have job equity in the Keystone debate, keep your mouth shut, ladies. Well, nurses reject that because that is an issue of public health. We do believe that the ability to breathe is a workers' issue. Call us narrow, call us what you will. And that fight, it is really a carbon bomb up there in the tar sands of Canada, and we have to fight that back. But the amazing thing about the environmental movement from a socialist perspective is that it's increasingly an anti-corporate movement. That it's taking on the energy corporations that are profiting from the current energy policy and saying we're going to divest from them. Maybe some of our student activists are working on those divestment campaigns on college campuses. That's a righteous demand, and we have to continue that. And then ultimately we do confront the issue of, are we going to be on our own, or are we going to have common dreams? And in healthcare, that is a direct relationship to policy, because the alternative, where the Affordable Care Act would go if conservative elements would let it play out, is that each of us would buy health insurance. That's where it's going. Or we're going to have a single-payer Canadian type system. Those are the alternatives, honestly, because the employer-based health insurance system is on its last legs. But ultimately, that issue comes down to the attack on government. And unless we as socialists are able to reinvigorate the notion of a public sector and a public sphere as one that can address our problems, our common problems, and meet human needs, our project will not succeed. And we know that the only vehicle that exists is that collective action against corporate power. We devote our lives to building it. Some of us are engaging in the first decade of activism, challenging the notion that we are on our own. What we do with the Robin Hood tax campaign is say, we know a better life is possible and we know how to pay for it. And when we say we're going to take our country back, we mean to take it back from the banks and the financiers who have robbed our communities, who have destroyed Main Street. And as socialists, we bear the greatest tradition in the history of the world in taking on and understanding these fights, and understanding the connection between environmental destruction and inequality, between austerity and the lack of humanity in our culture. And we are the bearers of a grand tradition, and I am so proud to be with you as this fight continues. Thank you.